My name's Marcus. I'm 23, and until a few weeks ago, I was living in the heart of a noisy city, running on fast food, late nights, and deadlines. I'm a graphic designer, freelance mostly, which sounds cooler than it feels. After my last relationship fell apart and the city started feeling too tight, too familiar, I packed up my stuff and moved 3 hours away to a lakeside town that I'd only ever seen in photos. Quiet, green, slower. I figured I'd give myself a chance to reset. The apartment I found was small but bright, just a short walk from the lake. Hardwood floors, big windows, the kind of place that feels peaceful as soon as you step inside. It was the right move. At least that's what I kept telling myself every night when I sat on my couch, scrolling through my phone, pretending I wasn't already missing the chaos I left behind. I didn't know anyone in town, not a single person. That part hit harder than I expected. Then, a few days after moving in, I heard a knock on my door. I opened it to find a guy about my age, maybe a year younger, standing there with a friendly grin and a six-pack of local beer. "Hey, I'm Ethan, next door," he said, nodding over his shoulder. "Figured I'd say hi before it gets weird, and we keep pretending not to see each other in the parking lot." I laughed. "Marcus, I just moved in." "No kidding, he said, handing me the six-pack. "Welcome to the neighborhood. You ever get bored? We usually hang out in the backyard in the evenings. Come by." It didn't take long before that invitation turned into a routine. Ethan was easy to talk to, the kind of guy who made you feel like you'd known him forever. We'd sit around his fire pit, sometimes with his friends, sometimes just the two of us, talking music, work, old stories, whatever. He made the town feel less empty. But the thing I noticed right away and kept noticing was the atmosphere in his house. Warm, comfortable, like every object, every scent, every quiet noise had been there forever and belonged. His home felt lived in the best way, not just decorated, but settled. And that feeling had a lot to do with his mother. The first time I met Laura, it was just a quick introduction. I was over at Ethan's one evening, and she came out of the kitchen wiping her hands on a dish towel. She was dressed casually, soft jeans, a navy cardigan, barefoot on the wood floors, but carried herself like she could have walked off a magazine cover without trying. She smiled easily. "You must be Marcus. I've heard about you already." There was something about her voice, confident but warm. Her eyes held mine a second longer than necessary, not in a weird way, just enough to register. "Hopefully only good things," I said, smiling. She laughed. "Mostly. Let me know if you ever get tired of frozen pizza. I cook real food around here." Then she was gone, back into the kitchen. The conversation moved on, but my mind didn't. I told myself it was just a crush, a normal, harmless crush. She was captivating, sure, but that didn't mean anything. And she was Ethan's mom, for God's sake. Still, over the next few weeks, I found myself at Ethan's place more often. Sometimes I told myself it was just for the company or the backyard hangouts, or the way their place felt more like home than mine did. But deep down, I knew it was the way Laura greeted me when I walked in, the way she asked about my work, remembered little things I'd said, the way she seemed completely at ease in her skin. She didn't try to impress anyone. She didn't have to. I caught myself looking at her when she spoke, watching how she tucked her hair behind her ear when she laughed, how she held her wine glass by the stem slowly, like she wasn't in a rush for anything. I thought I was being discreet. I wasn't. And that's when I started realizing this move might turn out to be more complicated than I ever expected. A couple of days later, I was at Ethan's again. It was just the three of us this time, me and Ethan and Laura. She had made pasta, something with roasted garlic and lemon that smelled like it came straight from some cozy restaurant tucked away in a hidden alley. "Don't let her fool you," Ethan said as he passed me a plate. "She cooks like this when she's trying to convince me to mow the lawn." Laura raised an eyebrow from across the table. "You mean like the lawn you still haven't touched in 3 weeks?" Ethan just grinned and took a bite. I tried not to laugh with my mouth full. The conversation drifted like it always did in that house, relaxed, unhurried, just people talking without any pressure. Laura didn't sit quietly like someone trying to stay out of the way. She joined in fully, cracking jokes, asking questions, teasing Ethan the way only a mom could. But there was something more to her humor. It was sharp, playful, even a little flirty in a way I don't think she realized. At one point, she turned to me and asked, "So, Marcus, why graphic design?" I shrugged. Honestly, it started with drawing band posters in high school. One thing led to another, and now I'm making logos for dental offices and coffee shops. She tilted her head, interested. "And you enjoy it?" "Some days more than others," I admitted. "I like creating. I just don't always like the people I create for." That made her laugh, and I caught myself watching the way her eyes crinkled at the corners when she smiled. That detail stuck with me for some reason. She leaned forward a bit, still holding her wine glass. "And what do you want to do with it? Big picture?" I paused. No one had really asked me that in a while. "I think I want to start something on my own eventually," I said. "Small design studio, just a couple of people doing work we actually care about." Laura nodded slowly, like she wasn't just listening but really hearing me. "I like that." The rest of the evening moved in a blur. We talked about cities we'd lived in, weird jobs we'd had, music we hated. Ethan told some embarrassing story about me tripping over a lawn chair the first week we met, and I laughed along, even though I could feel Laura's gaze flicking toward me when the story ended. Not in a mocking way, more curious, more focused. I tried not to look back at her, but I did, more than once. There was a moment, small, quiet, but it lodged in my memory like a splinter. Ethan had gone to grab more drinks, and it was just me and Laura sitting at the table. We didn't say anything right away. The evening air was warm, and the sound of the lake carried through the screen door. She sipped her wine, then said casually, "You think you'll stay here long?" I shrugged. "I don't know yet. Feels good for now." She nodded, looking at me over the rim of her glass. "Sometimes the best things are the ones you don't plan." I didn't know what to say to that. There was something behind her words, maybe, or maybe I was just reading into everything too much. Ethan came back, and the moment passed. But later, when I was lying in bed back at my place, her words kept echoing in my mind. So did the way her voice had softened just a little when she asked me about my goals. So did the way she never broke eye contact when she noticed me looking. That night, I didn't sleep much. I kept replaying things she'd said, not in a creepy way, just noticing how different it felt when she talked to me, like there was this current underneath every word, like we both felt something we weren't acknowledging yet. And that scared me a little because she was Ethan's mom, because she was 42, because I had no idea what she was thinking, and because, honestly, I was starting to want more than just dinner and conversation. I knew something had shifted. The question was, had it shifted for her too? It started to become a routine without me realizing it. Ethan would text me in the afternoon, "Come by later. We're just hanging out." And I'd show up. Sometimes we'd throw something on the grill. Sometimes we'd just sit out back with beers and talk about nothing. The kind of lazy, aimless time that felt like summer, even though it was only early spring. But I wasn't going over for the food or the talk. Not really. Laura always seemed to be there, not in a forced way. She wasn't hovering. She'd just pass through the living room with a laundry basket or come out to water the garden. Sometimes she'd join us for a little while, just enough to say something quick and clever that made Ethan roll his eyes and me laugh harder than I probably should. Every time I walked through their front door, she greeted me like she had been waiting. Even if it was just a quick smile over her shoulder, there was something easy about her presence. She was never trying too hard. That confidence, that subtle calm, it was magnetic. I could feel myself gravitating toward it without meaning to. And she started noticing things. One day she handed me a cup of coffee, black, just a splash of cream. "I remembered you said you don't do sugar," she said simply. Another time she put on a playlist while cooking, and I caught my favorite band coming through the speakers. She just smiled when I looked up, like it was no big deal. It was always something small, a glance, a moment, but each one built on the last. We were developing a rhythm. Our eye contact started lasting longer, not awkwardly, but deliberately. It was subtle, quiet. She'd look at me when Ethan was talking, and I'd look back, this unspoken thread that passed between us when no one else was watching. One evening, she was drying dishes at the sink while I helped Ethan carry stuff back from the patio. When I passed her a glass, her fingers brushed mine. Nothing dramatic, just a second too long, just enough for me to feel the warmth of her skin and for both of us to pause. She didn't pull away quickly, neither did I. She looked up, and I saw it in her eyes, something flickering, held back, unsure but very real. Later that same night, I caught the faint trace of her perfume on the jacket I'd left on the back of their kitchen chair. It hit me harder than it should have. I stood there for a few seconds, just holding the fabric before shaking my head and laughing at myself. I was losing it. Ethan didn't have a clue. If he did, he didn't show it. He treated it all like a casual hangout between two friends, and it was, on the surface. But underneath, everything was shifting. At least for me, because I couldn't stop thinking about her. The way her voice dropped a little when we were alone. The quiet way she said my name sometimes. Like she was testing how it felt in her mouth. The way she lingered in the kitchen after Ethan had gone upstairs. Just a minute too long. I started going over even when Ethan wasn't home, sometimes under the excuse of returning something I borrowed. A book, a tool, a charger. She never questioned it. She'd open the door and smile, like she expected me, like she had hoped I'd come. There was one particular afternoon when I stopped by unannounced. Ethan was still out, and I knew that before I rang the bell. I just didn't care. Laura answered the door in a soft gray sweater and jeans, barefoot, a mug of tea in her hand. "Oh," she said, surprised but not upset. "It's just you," I smiled. "Hope that's not disappointing." She looked at me for a long moment, then stepped back and let me in. We didn't do anything that crossed a line, not that day, but we sat in the living room alone, sunlight pouring through the window. She asked about a project I was working on, and I showed her a rough draft on my phone. She sat closer than usual. Her shoulder brushed mine once. I didn't move, neither did she. I left an hour later, and for the first time, I didn't feel confused. I knew this wasn't in my head anymore. It wasn't just a harmless crush on someone older and beautiful and off-limits. Something real was forming. Unspoken, yes, but undeniable. I walked home with that same perfume in my lungs and her voice in my head. And I told myself it was only a matter of time because whatever this was, it was already happening. It happened on a Sunday afternoon. Ethan had texted me earlier, saying he'd be gone most of the day, driving out to visit an old friend from college. I hadn't planned on going over, not really, but by late afternoon I found myself walking up the path to their front door without fully deciding to. Maybe I thought I'd just dropped something off. Maybe I told myself it was innocent. But deep down, I think I knew what I was hoping for. Laura opened the door before I could even knock, like she'd heard me coming. "Hey," I said, trying to sound casual. Her eyes flicked behind me, probably out of habit. "Ethan's not here." "I know," I said. I guess I just wanted to see you." She looked at me for a second, not smiling, not surprised either. "Come in," she said quietly. I stepped inside and she closed the door behind me. The house felt different with just the two of us in it. Quieter, still. She walked into the living room and sat down on the couch. I followed, sitting beside her, a safe distance away, but close enough to feel the edge of her presence. We didn't speak at first. There was a show playing softly on the TV, something neither of us was really watching. I could hear the ticking of the wall clock. I could hear my own breathing. Then she said, out of nowhere, "Do you always look at me like that?" I turned to her, surprised. "Like what?" She didn't look away. "Like I'm not supposed to be in the room, but you can't help staring anyway." I could have denied it, could have laughed it off, but I didn't. "I can't help it," I said softly. Her expression didn't change, but her shoulders dropped slightly, like something unspoken had finally landed. She looked down at her hands for a second, then back at me. "Do you know how complicated this is?" she asked, not accusing, just weary. "I do," I said, "but that doesn't make it go away." She exhaled slowly. Then, almost like she was testing gravity, she reached out and touched my face, just her fingertips against my cheek. Gentle, barely there. Everything inside me froze. She leaned in, just slightly, like her body wasn't fully sure what it was doing, and I did the same, pulled by something too real to ignore. The kiss was hesitant, soft, the kind of kiss that holds its breath. Our lips met just for a moment, and then she pulled back, eyes still closed. "I shouldn't," she whispered, but she didn't move away. We both know that, I said, but I don't regret it. Her eyes opened, then something shifted in them. She looked at me, not like a buddy, not like her son's friend, but like a man she was seeing for the first time. We didn't say much after that. There wasn't anything to explain. She walked me to the door a few minutes later. Her hand brushed mine as I left, and neither of us looked back. That night, I sat in my apartment with the lights off, phone on the table, untouched. I replayed every second in my head, over and over. I didn't feel guilty. Not yet. Not really. I felt something else, like a door had opened that couldn't be closed again. It was just a kiss, one moment, but it changed everything. The week after that kiss felt like living with a secret written on my skin. Every time my phone buzzed, I half expected it to be Laura. Every time I saw Ethan, I felt my stomach knot. But nothing happened. No texts, no glances, no sign that she wanted to talk about what had happened. And yet, I couldn't stop thinking about her. The way her hand had felt against my face, the way her voice had sounded right before we kissed. Soft but steady, like she was standing on a ledge she'd been avoiding for years. By Thursday, I couldn't take the silence anymore. Ethan had told me earlier in the week that he'd be out that night, some trivia thing with coworkers. I waited until the sun dipped low over the lake before walking to Laura's. I knocked once. She opened the door almost immediately, like she'd been standing just inside, waiting. She didn't say anything, just stepped aside so I could enter. Inside, the house smelled faintly of wine and something cooking. Rosemary, maybe. Soft music played in the kitchen, the kind that fills a room without demanding attention. She was barefoot, wearing a simple black dress that stopped just below her knees, casual but elegant. "Hi," I said quietly. "Hi," she replied. Then after a moment, "I wasn't sure you'd come. I wasn't sure you wanted me to." She gave a small, almost sad smile. "I shouldn't," she said, "but I did." We sat at the table. She poured me a glass of wine and we talked. At first, about nothing. Work, the lake, Ethan's trivia night. But slowly the conversation shifted, like water running down a slope. It always had. She told me about her divorce, how she'd built this house afterward, how it was supposed to be a fresh start, how she'd felt lonely in it for years. She spoke with her hands, tracing small shapes on the table as she talked. I told her about leaving the city, about feeling like I'd lost my footing there, about trying to start over but not knowing what over even meant. By the time our glasses were empty, the air between us felt heavy, electric. She reached over and touched my wrist lightly, as if testing whether she was allowed. I turned my hand over and held hers. We didn't need words after that. She leaned toward me, and I met her halfway. Our kiss this time wasn't hesitant. It wasn't trembling. It was slow and sure, like we both knew exactly what we wanted and had already chosen it. The rest of the night unfolded quietly, naturally. We moved from the kitchen to the living room, from sitting to standing, from holding hands to holding each other. There was no rush, no panic, just a long exhale that neither of us had realized we'd been holding for weeks. When we finally crossed the line we'd been circling, it felt nothing like I'd imagined. It wasn't reckless or wild. It was tender, gentle, like two people trying to speak a language they hadn't used in years but still remembered. Later, I lay beside her in the dim light of the bedroom, her hair spilled over the pillow, her breathing slow, her fingers still curled loosely around mine. Outside, the lake breeze rattled the leaves softly. Neither of us said anything. We didn't need to. For the first time since moving here, I felt completely still inside my own life. Not restless, not uncertain, just there. When the morning light slipped through the curtains, she stirred and turned toward me. Her eyes searched mine for a moment, like she was checking if what had happened was real. It was, we both knew it. We'd crossed a point of no return, and whatever came next, we weren't the same two people who had sat down at that dinner table hours earlier. The days after that night blurred together like brushstrokes on wet paint. I woke up in my apartment, still tasting the wine, still feeling the warmth of her skin under my hands. Everything outside looked the same, the lake, the sidewalks, the soft buzz of life in a small town. But I wasn't the same anymore. Neither was she. We didn't talk about what we were now, we didn't dare. But the rules started to form quietly, like a set of invisible lines we both understood. No calls when Ethan might see her phone. No unexpected visits when his car was in the driveway. If we crossed paths while he was home, it was small talk, polite smiles, nothing more. And yet the pull between us grew stronger. She would text me at odd hours, simple messages that said everything without saying anything. Coffee? You left your book here. Are you around later? Sometimes I'd answer, sometimes I'd just show up at her door when I knew the coast was clear. I found myself inventing excuses to be near her, dropping off something for Ethan, asking about a recipe she'd mentioned, borrowing a tool I didn't really need. Each time she'd open the door with that same quiet look, not exactly a smile, not exactly regret, and step back to let me in. Inside it felt like another world. We built something that wasn't just about stolen moments, but about the small, domestic things that slipped into them. She'd make coffee while I sat at the kitchen island, sketching ideas for work. I'd help her carry laundry upstairs or reach for a box on a high shelf. Once, she showed me an old photo album from before Ethan was born, her hair shorter, her smile the same. And I listened while she told me stories about cities she'd lived in, jobs she'd hated, roads she'd driven just to clear her head. It was strange how normal it felt, how easy. At night, when Ethan was out or asleep at a friend's, I'd sneak over and the normal things would slide into something else. A brush of her hand as she passed me a glass of wine. A quiet moment on the couch when her knee touched mine and stayed there. A look that lasted just long enough to make everything else disappear. We became more confident with each meeting. Our kisses deepened, slower but certain, as if we were learning a language that had been waiting for us all along. The quiet between us turned from tension into comfort. We stopped second-guessing. One evening, after I'd helped her move some heavy boxes from the attic, she leaned against the kitchen counter, hair falling loose around her face. "You make me feel alive again," she said quietly. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't a confession, just a truth she'd been carrying. I didn't think about the right answer. I just told her mine. "You've changed my life," I said. She reached out, brushed her fingers across my chest, and for a moment the house felt like it belonged only to us. We both knew it was dangerous. Every time a car passed by outside or a phone buzzed unexpectedly, we jolted back into reality. There were moments when she'd step away from me, suddenly muttering, "This can't happen again." But then, a day or two later, we'd find ourselves in the same place, pulled back together like magnets. Neither of us wanted to stop. When I left her house late at night, walking back to my apartment under the streetlights, I'd catch myself smiling at nothing. My hands still smelled faintly of her perfume. My chest still felt full in a way it hadn't in years. And yet, beneath it all, there was a quiet edge of fear, a question neither of us wanted to ask. How long could we keep this up before something cracked? Ethan started noticing things. Not the truth, not yet, but the patterns, the timing, the way I was always around. One night as we sat in the backyard tossing a football back and forth, he smirked and said, "Man, you're practically family now. I think my mom sees you more than her own reflection." I laughed it off, tossed the ball harder than necessary. "She's just being polite." "Nah," he said, catching it one-handed. "She likes you. You should see her when you're not here. Way less coffee, way less smiling." I tried to play it cool, but my face was burning. I looked down at the grass, shrugged and said, "She's easy to talk to, that's all." Ethan didn't push it. He just chuckled and went back to throwing. But after that, I couldn't shake the feeling that the walls were closing in. Laura felt it too. She texted me less. We stopped lingering at the door. We started keeping more distance when Ethan was home. Conversations clipped, eyes avoiding each other's too long. And yet, when we were alone, it was like nothing could hold us back. The tension only made it worse, or better. There was a night not long after when I came over with the excuse of helping Ethan set up a new grill. He got a call and went inside to take it, leaving me alone on the patio. Laura came out carrying a glass of wine, her footsteps soft against the wood planks. "He doesn't suspect anything," she said quietly, like she was still trying to convince herself. "I'm not so sure anymore," I replied, looking toward the house. She sat beside me, legs crossed, the curve of her knee brushing mine. I don't want to hurt him, she said. I don't either. We didn't kiss that night. We didn't even touch beyond that brief moment of skin against skin. But something about the stillness between us made it more intense than anything physical. We were both trying to slow something down that had already built too much momentum. The next time we were alone, a week later, all that restraint disappeared. She'd invited me over while Ethan was working late. I walked through the door and didn't make it past the hallway. She kissed me before I could speak, pulled me into her like the world was ending, and I was the last thing she wanted to hold. That night, we moved through her house like shadows, quiet, careful, desperate. It wasn't soft anymore. It was hunger, the kind that builds from weeks of silence and side glances and holding back. Afterward, we lay tangled in sheets, the room dim, the air heavy with what we didn't say. I hate this, she whispered. I turned toward her. Being with me? No, she said, not being able to be. I didn't answer. I didn't know how. Later that week, Ethan made another offhand comment. You're here more than you're home. You might as well pay rent. I forced a laugh. Guess I just like the company. He looked at me for a second, his smile fading just a bit. You ever have a thing for older women? It hit me in the chest. I blinked. What? He shrugged. I don't know, just something I heard you say once. I shook my head, pretending to be amused. You hear a lot of weird stuff. But that night, I barely slept. Laura texted me. He's starting to notice. I replied, I can't give you up. When I saw her next, the urgency between us had changed. It wasn't just about attraction anymore. It was about not wanting to lose the one place that felt real. Every moment became more intense. Her hand in mine, her voice saying my name, the way she looked at me like I was the only person who'd ever really seen her. We didn't talk about what would happen if Ethan found out, not directly, but it was there between every kiss, every hushed breath, every glance toward the window. We were falling faster, deeper, with no idea how to stop, and both of us knew the crash was coming. The secret got heavier, but we didn't stop. If anything, we held onto it tighter, like the danger made it more real. Like if we let go of it even for a second, the whole thing would unravel. Ethan kept joking about how much time I was spending at their house. Sometimes he'd nudge me and say things like, you trying to move in or what? I'd laugh and deflect, say something about the food or the view or how boring my place was. But every time he said something like that, I could feel Laura's eyes on me, a flicker of worry, a question she didn't ask out loud. We were always one step away from being found out. A door creaking at the wrong moment, a glance that lasted too long, the faint sound of my voice in the hallway when Ethan wasn't supposed to know I was there. And yet, we kept choosing each other. I started keeping a change of clothes in my backpack. She started locking her bedroom door just in case. When Ethan wasn't home, we were reckless. Not in what we did, but in how much we let ourselves feel. We'd spend hours curled up on her bed or sitting on the floor, just talking, touching, being. We weren't rushing anymore. It wasn't just about the thrill. It was about the need, the kind that grows quietly until it becomes part of your routine, part of your day, part of you. One morning, I woke up in her bed to the soft sound of birds outside the window and the smell of fresh coffee from the kitchen. She was sitting on the edge of the bed, her hair pulled back loosely, still in one of my shirts. I don't feel alone anymore, she said, almost like she was thinking out loud. I sat up slowly, rubbing my eyes. You're not. She turned to me, eyes a little tired but clear. You know this can't last forever, right? I didn't answer right away. I hated that question, not because I didn't know the answer, but because I did. But I said what I meant. I don't care about forever. I care about right now. I care about you. She smiled, small and warm. That's the problem. I do too. There was no dramatic moment of decision, no grand plan. We didn't sit down and map out how to keep going. We just kept waking up and choosing each other, choosing to live in the moments we had, choosing to protect the little world we built. Fragile, quiet, secret, but ours. Some nights, we stayed up late on the back porch, wrapped in a blanket, whispering like kids with a crush, knowing the risk and leaning into it anyway. She'd rest her head on my shoulder, and I'd think, this is real, this matters, this is more than a mistake. We knew how dangerous it was, we knew what we were risking, but we also knew the feeling of finally being seen, finally being understood, finally feeling wanted. And neither of us had felt that in a long time. We didn't call it love, not yet, but maybe that's what it was. Ethan never found out, not then anyway. He just assumed I liked the house, the food, the ease of it all. Maybe a part of him knew something wasn't adding up, but he never pushed. And so we kept going. No promises, no illusions, just quiet mornings, shared smiles, and soft touches when no one else was looking. A stolen world we chose to protect for as long as we could. What does it mean to find a connection that makes you feel truly alive, yet know it comes with a cost? As you reflect on Marcus and Laura's story, consider this. What happens when we encounter someone who sees us in a way we've forgotten we could be seen? This tale isn't just about a forbidden spark. It's a mirror to our own desires for meaning and connection. What lesson can we draw from their delicate dance of glances and whispers, their choice to embrace something real despite its fragility? Isn't it true that life's most profound moments often arrive uninvited, in places we least expect, challenging us to weigh safety against the pull of authenticity? Marcus, seeking a fresh start, stumbles into Laura's orbit and discovers more than friendship, a rare recognition that redefines his sense of self. Laura's question, do you always look at me like that? Unveils a truth. To be seen is to be known, and that vulnerability can ignite something transformative. Yet their story carries a shadow, the weight of secrecy, the looming risk of discovery. Doesn't this echo our own lives, where we sometimes hide our truest selves to avoid judgment? Their stolen moments, filled with quiet touches and shared truths, teach us that life rewards those who dare to feel deeply, even when the path is uncertain. The ache of their connection, fragile yet fierce, reminds us that belonging often comes at the cost of courage. So what moment in your life made you feel truly seen? Have you ever chased a connection that felt impossible yet undeniable? Share your story in the comments. Your words might spark inspiration for someone else. If this moved you, hit that subscribe button and join our journey. Let's keep exploring the lessons that shape us together.